Hello. All right. So by the time you get to the summer of 1942, the Allies in the Pacific have been going through a number of months of great difficulty after the Japanese invasion of China in the late 1930s. The decisions to extend the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere, the phased offensive operations against the Philippines, Pearl Harbor, and a wide variety of other territories. The American military was reeling, the British were reeling, the Dutch and others were reeling, and the Philippines at Bataan and Corregidor were holding out at least for a short period of time, but would then eventually surrender, and the Bataan Death March would occur. Now, following on that summer, at Coral Sea and at Midway, the U.S. Navy would, especially at Midway, experience great success. Through effective naval intelligence, a bit of luck, the destruction of a number of carriers in the Imperial Japanese Navy made it very difficult for the Japanese going forward to continue to carry out similar offensive operations. Now, the Americans in early 1942 had tried to punch back, at least for a short bit. They had carried out a raid referred to as the Doolittle Raid in the spring, a short bombing attempt against Japan. Though limited, it demonstrated the future capacity of the American military to project force into the Japanese mainlands, which would only continue as the war went on. Now, 1942 is a difficult year. It's a year in which the Germans are expanding and continuing their offensives into Russia, shifting their focus eventually towards Stalingrad and getting bogged down there. It's a year in which the Americans and the British will carry out a massive invasion in North Africa. It's a year in which the combined bomber offensives are occurring. The Battle of the Atlantic is occurring. And when it came to the Pacific, there was a great question of where is the focus for the Americans going to be? Now, after supporting Australian defense, the Americans needed to be able to take positions to push back against the Japanese, and this dictates why Guadalcanal becomes a focus in late 1942. Now, this is an operation that, although the Americans will eventually be successful, the Marines that land there, it's one fraught with conflict. It's one fraught with great difficulty. It's one that really is the first drawn out, after those initial invasions, ground combat between the Americans, the Marines there in Guadalcanal, and Japanese military forces. And it's brutal. The Americans are low on supplies. The U.S. Navy eventually has to pull back after one point because of the losses that they receive against the Japanese Navy. Running what was called the slot at the time, this sort of space where ships can run back and forth to deliver supplies, was a very treacherous process, and one that resulted in a number of casualties, most notably the Sullivan brothers. So all these brothers in one family. Although the Americans emerged successful by early 1943, Guadalcanal really demonstrated, one, the importance of logistical success of the Navy and everything. It demonstrated the racialization of the war, right? That begins in earnest there, and out of it, you're going to see a conflict that is often shaped by that. Now, Between 1943 and 1944, right, you have the Americans seeking allied objectives of being able to eventually get to China to be able to make bases, air bases, to be able to bomb Japan from. However, in 43 and early 44, some of the successes are going to kind of speed that up so it no longer becomes the focus of bases. But again, this modified version of island hopping and all that. And there are any number of islands and any number of campaigns to retake islands in 43 and early 44 that are evidence of this, from Tarawa to Gloucester, at Peleliu. And at Tarawa, to highlight one, it's a process whereby the Allies had to, where the Americans had to recognize the importance of combined arms, had to recognize the importance of landing craft because of the use of coral reefs and how do you navigate all that. And they emerge successful, not without great casualty. All right. Thank you very much.